we will try and make it as engaging as possible. But it is essential to understand why and how we do things before we start to talk about what, which really is the fun part. You're going to be asked to complete a few activities on your smartphone, as Charlotte just mentioned, which hopefully you've got handy. Please be assured that your answers are confidential and won't identify you individually, and no individual information is going to be collected or retained. One of the first and most important messages we want to convey is that you're not alone. We hope these workshops are going to be emotionally safe spaces where you're going to feel comforted by the fact that for all of us, emotions are up and down, and that all children exhibit negative behaviours even without a pandemic. It doesn't make you a bad parent, it doesn't make them bad children if we see negative behaviours. But more about that later. So if anyone's uncomfortable with any of this, it's absolutely fine just to sit back and listen, there is no pressure. So without further ado, our partners in this event, we're delighted to say, are Frost Garden Centres and Greensand Country. And both of these organisations are actively promoting the idea of getting outside through gardening, outdoor spaces, at home, in parks and across landscapes. They're perfect partners to amplify our message that there are many, many ways to spend great time outdoors, be that in our gardens, in our parkland. It's all right there on our doorstep. It's a sad fact that before lockdown, 60% of the UK population who live within 3 miles of open green space never actually access it. The last 3 months have been quite hard to describe. I don't know about you, but each day that passes brings a different set of challenges and emotions. Many of us are spending more time together than we ever have. This may have created excitement amongst many of us, but sadly, for others, it might have brought about feelings of uncertainty and fear, and also challenges. Our living situations are unique, as are the dynamics within those environments. So some of us have been locked down with people that we perhaps didn't really know. Others might have been separated from loved ones, and those who they've relied upon for support and comfort. So, as we accept that we are all now about to face another challenge, in some ways a more difficult transition to make than the one that's led us into this, as we start to emerge from lockdown. As we go through that transition, we're going to emerge as different people, different to those that we were at the start of March in 2020. We are actually people who've been through a lot of trauma. And whilst I don't want to really focus on trauma and the details and connotations of that word, because it's normally associated with things like war, the definition of a trauma is a deeply distressing and disturbing experience. But really, that's exactly what we have all been through, every single one of us. And so it would be foolish not to at least acknowledge that. Some people will be in better shape than others. But one thing's for sure, when we think about supporting our children and those around us, what we first must do is to evaluate our own ability to do that. We need to start and reflect on our own well-being. So now I'm going to hand you over to Rebecca, and she's going to share with you one of the first practices that we always encourage people to do when taking charge of their own well-being. Okay, Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. So hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm going to go through one of the strategies we use when working with children and families. It's a very simple one, and one that we use regularly in our daily lives. This is a breathing exercise that enables us to pause before acting or speaking. Focused breathing is a strategy that is really helpful to use with our children too, and can help to de-escalate a situation. It's likely that some of you already practice this and others perhaps not, but we just want to take 1 minute to go through a simple breathing exercise that should help to relax us all and start to prepare us for the rest of the workshop. So to start to ease us into focusing our minds on ourselves, I want you to make sure that you're sitting comfortably. We're going to switch off from everything that is going on around us. If it feels right with you, you can close your eyes. And we're going to start to focus on our breathing. Breathing in slowly through our nose and exhaling out through our mouths. If you were doing this exercise with your children, get them to visualize a dandelion, and as we exhale, we are blowing the seeds away. We are going to allow our breath to get slower and deeper. Feel the rise and fall of our chests with each breath in and out. Concentrating on the here and the now. If your mind begins to wander, slowly bring it back to the focus of your breathing, in and out. Feel your shoulders drop. Feel that tension fall. All that matters is that breath, in and out. In and out. Slowing your mind, slowing your breathing. Feel the calm, feel the stillness. Slowly open your eyes and begin to bring your focus back to the room and your surroundings. And hopefully you are now feeling calm and relaxed and ready to carry on with the rest of the webinar. I'm now going to pass you over to Jen.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, I'm Jen and I'm part of the Wildlife team. We're now going to begin to look a little bit deeper into the subject of well-being, starting off by looking at our own well-being before we move on to that of our whole family unit. So we've just done this very short breathing exercise with Rebecca that hopefully provided you with a moment's peace or clarity, an opportunity to focus your mind, or a chance to reflect on how you're feeling. And personally, I always find that it's amazing how just dedicating a few moments to ourselves, giving ourselves some quality time out, can have a huge difference on our mental and emotional state. But in reality, how often do we allow ourselves this time? In fact, how often do you stop and just ask yourself the very simple question, how am I doing? In most cases, I'd venture probably not enough. I know that I don't do that enough, and most of my friends and family don't either. Generally, we're just so wrapped up in everything that's going on in our life, so focused on making sure everyone else is okay, putting their needs first, that our own well-being is just an afterthought and just goes out the window and we just soldier on. But how am I doing is such an important question, and one that ultimately impacts overall family well-being. For how are we as parents or grandparents or primary carers supposed to address the well-being of others, particularly children who rely on us to be their rock, who see us as providers of love or support or security, all those things that encourage positive social and emotional development in childhood, if we've not checked in on ourselves. If we look at it this way, if you're drowning in a sea of emotion and you're completely overwhelmed and you're not in control of your own well-being, then how are you going to keep others afloat? It's just not possible. It's as simple as that. We'll just end up dragging them down into the dark depths like a big sinking ship. So if we go on to look at lockdown has been an extreme and uncertain period for most people. We'll have all experienced a whole range of emotions, some good and some bad. We'll have had wonderful days where we've been outside in the beautiful sunshine, playing together, creating amazing memories, building relationships, learning together, doing all the things that we've always wanted to do together but just haven't had time, and we should be really grateful for that. But then on the other hand, we've had loads of really challenging times where we felt like we haven't achieved anything that we set out to do that day or met any of the expectations that we hope to do, and feel like we're failing at everything that we try to do, whether that's homeschooling or parenting or trying to look after your house or do your work. And that feeling of failure or frustration is really, really difficult to overcome. So to help us start to explore the range of emotions that we've been feeling during this time and start to ask the question about how we're doing, we're now going to do a simple exercise using our smartphones where we're going to ask you to share your emotions that you felt personally over the past 3 months. So I'm going to hand over to Charlotte and she's going to explain how it's going to work.
Hi, thanks Jen. So if everybody would like to pick up their smartphones, and I'm just going to pull up a screen which shows the next question we're going to ask, but if you can type into your browser www.menti.com, and the screen should appear that allows you to put in a code. So if you type in 720630, you should see what you're seeing on your computer screen right now. And I'm going to hand back over to Jen once you guys have all got set up, and we're going to do the exercise through Mentimeter.
Great, thanks Charlotte. So we're posing the question to you: what are the main emotions that you've experienced during lockdown? Now remember that this exercise is completely anonymous, so we encourage you to be as open and honest as you possibly can be. We'll have all felt different emotions at different points throughout lockdown, triggered by a whole host of different things that are going on in our lives. But try to think about the feelings that have been most consistent, or the ones that have had the most impact over your well-being. Also, start to think about the smaller emotions that are starting to build inside you, maybe, or becoming a bit of a concern. Those ones that are kind of niggling and sending out an early warning to you that something could develop into something that become a big issue for you. Also, don't forget to think about the positive things as well. We've had so many positive moments, positive things that have gone on where we've built relationships and done amazing things together as a family unit. And we can learn lots from others about how they've stayed positive throughout this period, the strategies that they've used and the activities that they've done together to keep them mentally focused and emotionally stable during this really difficult time. Remember not to dwell on it. Usually the first things that spring to mind are the ones that have had the most impact on you. So we can see lots of action going on the screen, lots of movement and lots of words coming up. It's changing constantly at the moment, so I'm going to give you a few more moments. I'll give you a bit of an explanation of what's going on. So the big words that you can see represent feelings that many people, or emotions that many people are feeling, and the small words are emotions that fewer people are feeling in this particular session. And that is a very important thing to remember. We've got to remember that this is just a snapshot of how everyone's feeling today, and very much reflects how we're feeling today as well as how we've felt over the entire period. And if we did the same poll tomorrow, other emotions may dominate. If we wake up feeling anxious, then those sorts of emotions will spring to mind first. Whereas if we wake up feeling positive and happy and ready to start the day and energized, then, you know, we're thinking about the more positive aspects of lockdown, and those take center stage. So nothing is wrong, and everything is normal. I think that's what we want to get across. So it's still moving around a lot, lots of activity. Remember, you can put more than one word in. Just give you a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to start to talk about it because there's a couple of words in there that are big and they're not really changing. So anxious and overwhelmed are two that are really standing out. I know that as a team, we've all been feeling extremely overwhelmed from the start until now of the lockdown period. We've had so much to juggle. I think that's the case for everyone. Those of us that have children, we've had to take on that teacher role. We've been homeschooling. We've had to learn how to deal with our children in that situation. We've also been working. We've been juggling looking after our house, our relationships. For many people also, who've had financial concerns, job security concerns, worries about health and relationships in other parts of your family with people that you can't really see that often. So it's been an extremely overwhelming time. And anxiety links through to that. We've had so much dumped on us at last minute without very much warning. And that's an extremely stressful situation to be in. Everything is very uncertain. We're given different snippets of news every day. We don't really know what's right and what's wrong anymore. We're very anxious about going out. We're anxious about doing anything really, but worried we're going to risk our health and our happiness in life. So yeah, so it started to stop, so that's really good. We've got other ones. Happiness. Now, happy, that is a brilliant one. It's so good to see that we've got some positive ones that have come up big, and that lots of you feeling that way. And that's back to what I was saying before about us having lots of time together as a family, where we've been able to just take a break from like the pressures of life, not commuting, not rushing around, just having time where we can get to know each other a bit more, and do things that we've always wanted to do together, and that's been really, really important. We've got things like challenged and trapped, turmoil, claustrophobic, weird, stressed, scared. I mean, there's so many things that so many negative emotions that we've been feeling, and things that can have a huge impact on our life and our well-being. We've also got a few more here. Excited, that's a great one. Chilled. It's great that some people are taking this opportunity to really take a break and really think about how they could improve their lives going forward, and how they can make changes so they're not rushing around so much. So I'll leave you to read the rest of those there. There's quite a few to get through, but what I really want to say about this is that where we've got big ones, big words appearing, it really shows us that we're not alone with these feelings, that it's really completely normal to feel this way, and given the extreme and uncertain circumstances in which we've been existing, that's quite reassuring to know, I think, and quite a relief to many people. It's kind of like that strength in numbers kind of scenario. We know we're not alone. Other emotions or behaviours that are coming up as smaller words simply show the range of emotions that we've been feeling throughout this period, and how it's affected us in such a diverse and personal way, depending on our own situations. But the most important thing is that we're starting to reflect on how we're feeling, which is important when we go into the next stage and start to look at why we're feeling certain things. And then from that, gauge if this is a theme or an isolated emotion that we're experiencing. So to help us delve a bit deeper into the state of our wellbeing, we've devised a tool to help us do this easily. We've called it the Web of Wellbeing, and it's going to appear on your screen shortly. And it's based upon the Circle of Wellbeing, which is a commonly used professional development resource, which some of you may already be aware of. In this instance, we focus on some of the factors that we feel are important to consider when trying to identify the root cause of an emotion that we're feeling or a behaviour that we're displaying. Once we know the reasons behind feelings or behaviours, we can start to take action to rebalance our overall well-being, and start to look at how we can help ourselves and help our family emerge from lockdown positively. So, if we have a look at the Web of Wellbeing here, we've included 8 elements which we feel have had the most impact on our wellbeing throughout lockdown. This model can be adapted to your needs. You can interchange any of the categories to ones that you feel are more relevant to your lifestyle. These are ones that we feel have had the most impact on the majority of people. You will get this sheet at the end of the session sent through to you in a resource pack, along with all the other slides that appear in the webinar today. So you can have a go at trying it out at home and thinking about how these different categories have affected you personally. But what I'm going to do now is just go through the different categories with you, give you a feel for what they mean, and give you a few prompts so you can start to think about how those areas have affected you personally. So if we start with emotional fragility, this is really about how, whether you're feeling overwhelmed with emotion in life, you could be on the verge of tears all the time, or you could be displaying angry outbursts, or perhaps on the other hand, you're feeling really happy and resilient and content. It's kind of, are you wearing your emotions on your sleeve? Or are you really feeling strong? We move on to physical health and appearance, really very important things at this time. You may be really worried about your health. Maybe you're lockdown habits have led to poor eating habits. Maybe you've gained weight, or maybe you've lost weight because of stress or anxiety, or perhaps your fitness regime has changed and you're not feeling as fit and active as you normally would. Perhaps you can't go to the gym anymore, and you just had to change your ways and just not feeling as strong and healthy. Perhaps, you know, you're unhappy about your appearance at the moment. As I said, you maybe because of weight gain or weight loss, you're not fitting into your clothes anymore. Maybe the fact that your hair isn't looking great because you haven't been able to get to the hairdresser, that's putting a downer on your mood. Or maybe the fact that your nails look terrible. You know, all these things are really important. To some people, they may seem superficial, but to many people, they're the things that really make you feel good about yourself and boost your mood. If we move on to home environments, now, our home traditionally is our safe space. It's where we feel the most security, and it's where we feel happy and most comfortable in our skins and able to be ourselves. But during lockdown, it's become effectively our world. It's become the place where we spend most of our time, and it's been also a place of confinement for many, almost feeling a bit like a prison. I mean, back in the last diagram that we had, there was mention of claustrophobia, and I think that's a feeling that a lot of people have been sensing during this time. That's partly to do with living with the same people 24/7. There's often, because of that, more mess, more chaos, more noise, more dirt, and it can really get you down and really affect your mood and affect your level of concentration and focus. If we move on to stress and anxiety, now that is a really big one, and one that many of you seem to have felt during this time, and covers lots of different things. I mean, it could be that you're stressed or anxious about how COVID-19 could affect you or your friends or family. Maybe you're anxious about going out, perhaps to the supermarket or even the pubs now they're open, or just emerging from lockdown in general. Or maybe you're stressed about your children going back to school, mixing with other children, or how they're going to transition back into that sort of environment, whether they're going to be happy. Maybe you've got financial or job security concerns, or perhaps you're feeling stressed out about the whole situation. I mean, it is extremely stressful. If we move on to quality time now, this has lots of pluses and minuses for people, I think. Are you feeling that you're getting lots out of lockdown? Are you spending more time together as a family with your partner or with your children? Are you doing all the things that you've wanted to do, always wanted to do together, making lots of time for each other and listening to each other and having fun together? Or do you just feel overstretched and overwhelmed trying to juggle everything? And are you suffering from a serious lack of me time? And I'm sure all of us are suffering from that a bit. There's very little escapism during this time. There's very little time to find respite. The next one we've got is energy levels. Now, we're not really rushing around in the same way that we used to. We're not having to do the commute to work, for instance. We're not doing school runs. We're not a taxi service for our children after school, taking them to various after school clubs. So in many ways, we should have more energy, more physical energy perhaps, but I think the thing that's really stood out the most is the fact that a lot of us are lacking in mental energy, and that's the thing that's really been drained during this time. Again, back to the thing of us having to juggle so many things and having so much on our mind all the time. And a lot of us will find that we've been having trouble sleeping as well, maybe suffering from insomnia. We've got so many things going around our mind at night that we're unable to relax and really let go and fall into a deep sleep. So if you're not getting any sleep and then you're waking up and then you're having to go through the next day juggling all the same things again, then it does become mentally exhausting and really affect our energy levels. And many of you said that you're feeling very tired as a result of this period. So, I mean, that's very true. The next one is support and relationships. Now, this is a really big one for families, I think, particularly families that have grandparents and support mechanisms nearby that help get through the day. and are a big support. So we haven't been able to see so many members of our family. We haven't been able to use our friends for support in the same way as we normally would. We haven't been able to access childcare in the same way. We're having to manage our work as well as our children at the same time, which is incredibly difficult. Our children are probably feeling like they're going stir crazy as well, because they're not getting out, they're not going to see friends and relatives in the same way. Some of us may be feeling really alone or struggling to manage, and we don't feel like we've got any sort of sounding board because we're only able to see friends and family virtually and not able to see them face to face, and we can't talk to them in the same way as we would have normally. And some people have found that this period's put a massive strain on their relationships. I mean, we've heard in the news how domestic violence has gone up, divorce rates have gone up. It's a really challenging time when you're put together in a fairly claustrophobic, confined situation for a long period of time. You really have to learn how to get on with each other, and unfortunately for some people, that hasn't happened. We move on to the next one, and we've got mental stability. Now, this is really about how focused and in control you are of your mind. Some of you will be feeling like you're really on it, you're on the ball with everything, you're organised, and you're feeling massively in control about everything, and there's no worries there. Others of you will feel like you're swinging erratically from one thought or feeling to another, or perhaps you're feeling mentally clouded and depressed, maybe withdrawn or uncommunicative. And you know, this is kind of, these emotions are all very common, and kind of a result of going through a traumatic period. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the Web of Wellbeing for our next activity. So I'm going to pass over to Charlotte and Rachel, and they're going to explain how it's going to work.
Thanks, Jen. Yes, so it's over to me. So if you want to pick up your smartphones again, we're going to move back to Mentimeter, and I'm just going to open up the question for you. So if you click on to next question, it should pull up the page that you're going to see on the screen. So it's reflective of the Web of Wellbeing that we've just been looking at, and it gives you the chance to go through it yourselves and tick off each question with how you're feeling, with 1 being the best, and then 5 moving up to not. So I'm going to hand over to Rachel, who's going to talk you through this a little bit more.
Thanks, Charlotte. Okay, so what we've got in front of us is pretty much a Mentimeter version of the Web of Wellbeing that Jen's just shared with you. And as Charlotte said, on your phones now, you should have something that resembles what's on the screen, and each of the categories you are being asked to just literally just to rate yourself. So this is about your own personal lockdown experience. The results on this one are actually going to be hidden. So as you start to go through each of the categories, just try and score yourself, 1 meaning that you've actually found it a breeze, and 5 that actually you've really struggled in that area, just based upon the categories that Jen's just been through. And in a few minutes, once you've had the chance to do that, I'm going to shut up for a minute to give you some time just to focus, and we'll have a look at the results. I can see that quite a few of you have submitted your answers, so don't fret. We haven't actually shown the results yet, but there's still time for those of you that are going through it. So in just a few seconds, we'll just start to reveal the answers as they've come in. Okay, so I'm going to ask Charlotte if she doesn't mind just disclosing the results now. And for those of you that are still working your way through the list, feel free to just continue to do that and submit your answers, because it'll still update. Okay. So what we've got here is really the demographic across everybody that's on the webinar. And it's really interesting to see how centralized all of the results are. So I guess you'd expect there to be a kind of, you know, a nucleus of results around the center. But on this particular diagram, there's a couple of things that stand out for me. So if we look at the score for stress and anxiety levels at 3.7, I think that score does reflect what we saw earlier on the previous diagram, when we identified that feeling overwhelmed and feeling anxious was one of the most common emotions that we'd been through, and that scored a 3.7. So quite a few of us that are on the webinar have experienced feelings or high feelings of stress and anxiety. Energy levels is the other category that stands out, the other kind of peak that we've got on here. And energy levels, again, as Jen said, you know, our energy levels have dipped at times, and we may have had bursts of energy at other times. So it's a really interesting score that we've got there. And what we'd like you to do is, between now and the next webinar, is, as Jen said, we're going to issue this in the resource pack, and we'd just like you to score your own, and then maybe compare how your own results differ from what we've seen here with everybody's. The things that we need to look out for really are those peaks. So on this one, the energy levels and stress and anxiety levels. So anything that's perhaps over a 3, edging towards a 4, certainly anything that's a 5, this chart is really going to help to pinpoint the areas of your life that perhaps you need to start thinking about addressing. And the first steps towards that are going to be identifying really what's leading to those feelings of stress or anxiety, what's leading to maybe a dip in your energy levels, and start to really critically look at those areas and how you might be able to maybe improve those. So for example, if you're stressed and anxious, that may make you more short-tempered. And when we start to talk about the well-being of our children and how we can support them, it may mean we're on a shorter fuse. Perhaps we get agitated or frustrated. Perhaps our levels of patience aren't what they could be. So it's a really great indicator and a really good tool to start to use to assess your own well-being before we start to think about how our children are doing. Okay, and I think that's really all I need to say about that. As I say, it's going to be in your pack, so feel free. And if there are any questions after the webinar or even during, just put them in the chat or drop us an email, and we'll attempt to answer them in the next webinar. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand you over to Gemma, because we've talked quite a lot about our own well-being, and actually what we want to try and start to focus on now is the well-being of our children and how that might differ in terms of our approach and the way we look at that. So over to you, Gemma.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi everybody, I'm Gemma, another member of the Wild for Life team, and just moving on from looking at the web of well-being that we can use as adults and parents and carers, you might not, or you might be aware of how you need to consider how your own well-being can directly impact those around you, so your children, other family members, and just your family home environment. So it's really important to take a step back and think about, when observing your children or those around you, how we can begin to understand how they process information very differently, and why sometimes we can observe some of those changes in our children, but actually finding it really hard to understand what that behaviour actually resembles or what that means. So I'm hoping this part of the webinar will be able to support you in kind of starting to have a bit of a shift in your mindset as to being a little bit more open in the way of your thoughts, in the way that your child might behave, but also in turn for you to understand maybe a bit more about how they feel and the emotions associated with the behaviours that they're perhaps presenting to you. And it's what we refer to as part of a transformational change. So children's minds develop very slowly over a period of time, and at that young age that they're not always able to identify what that actual emotion means. So for example, they might share with you they feel nervous, and that might resemble butterflies in their tummy, but they won't necessarily always connect that feeling with maybe feeling frightened or nervous. So for example, as they're perhaps returning into school now, or into a social environment with maybe some friends or other family members that haven't been in your bubble quite so immediately or more recently, they might not necessarily understand what that emotion actually feels like or or means, and in turn for you to be able to understand how to support them with some of those difficult feelings. So we then typically and very logically are drawn to the behaviour side of things. So they might present maybe overexcitable. It might be that they're punching, kicking, just squabbling a bit more with siblings, or being a bit more manipulative to yourselves. And it's really easy to overlook the emotion that is actually behind that behaviour. And due to children developing their feelings and emotions at different speeds, but also in different ways and developmentally, we can very easily not be perhaps so constructive in our ways of maybe how we can support them, and how we can start to identify some of those early signs in ways of unlocking how they're feeling and how we can support them perhaps a bit more constructively and maybe more comfortably. So we need to look at, as I said, ways of unlocking how we can support them. And we would refer to, which is going to come a little bit later in the webinar, about how we can look at the root cause of the behaviour. So the hidden meaning behind why children behave in certain ways that they find difficult to understand, but also as adults and their support network, how maybe we need to have a little bit more understanding around that as well. And it's very logical and probably quite natural to look at the behaviour, but how we can start to look at those early signs. And we can start to do that through some really fun and engaging activities. And it's what, as the Well4Life team, we refer to as the look and learn approach. So this is the point of the workshop where hopefully we can start to think about linking those emotions and feelings to how we can provide opportunities to connect with our children as parents or carers in nature-led activities. But as we all feel really passionately about what a healthy and balanced child looks like, there might be different areas that is taken into account. So it could be their sleeping patterns, how healthily they might be eating, the interaction with those in the family, but also maybe some interaction with their peers that they're now starting to be a bit more sociable with, physical exercise, and actually how much fun they're having. So what we do need to remember, though, that a child's physical, emotional and social development is really individual to them, just as individual as they are. And it is very easy to fall into that trap of comparing siblings, comparing children to their friendship groups. And those behaviours might become a little bit more noticeable as they're starting to return into school, or maybe back into social situations that they've been removed from for a significant period of time. And some of those behaviours that they're experiencing, but also what your experiences as parents and carers, might be really unfamiliar to them and you. So we have put together a few common areas that follow on quite nicely from the slide that Jen looked at previously in the webinar, that you might have experienced. And in just a moment on the screen will come up, hopefully, some common areas where you, as I say, you might have experienced, or maybe not quite so familiar with you, but might be at some point, or you might have experienced. And this follows in the same format as the one that Jen referred to, where you could look at the well-being with your children. So if we just take a look at a couple where you can see tantrums and tears at the top. So it might be that you've observed your child or your children to be a bit more tearful, a bit out of sorts, feeling a bit sad. You know your children best. You are going to recognise and identify the changes in them, whether that be on a daily basis, whether that be in different situations or new situations. It might be that they're sleeping more or sleeping less. As children are returning back to school, there is a lot more, or has been a lot more, demand in terms of homeschooling. So as you as parents, but also routines have evaporated. So sleep patterns are going to be a little bit all over the place, perhaps more screen time, completing schoolwork, but also using apps where your children can be socially interactive with their friends, because we know that's an important aspect of growing independently and the social interaction that as a family we can't always give them what their friends can give them, and vice versa. It might be that they've been a bit more excitable, a bit more hyperactive, but then also perhaps a bit more aggressive, perhaps more physical. So behaviours, as I say, some you may not have observed, some that might just be a little bit more heightened than others. Perhaps pushing boundaries, not listening, being a bit more argumentative than before, or maybe complete opposite, being a bit manipulative, just pushing those boundaries that they perhaps haven't done before because they're just trying to ascertain how they're feeling and actually not really understanding how to deal with these feelings. It might be that you've observed your child or your children to be a bit more clingy. As I say, routines have been evaporated. Children's independence has perhaps been a bit more lost. That routine has changed. They've not got that normal, or the new normal is something very different that actually as adults we're trying to work out. So imagine how a child is trying to identify what that might look like. So this will be in your pack. It would be really good before the next webinar for you to spend some time with your child or your children just to go through some of those areas. And as I say, some of them might be a bit more familiar with you than others. There might be some that actually you don't identify, or maybe you're starting to see traits of. So yes, it would be a really good exercise to do, and it'd be great if you feel comfortable to perhaps share, or if you've got any questions around that, then please do email us, and we can, you know, have a discussion around those. But hopefully, I'm going to hand over to Sam in just a moment, who's going to share some nature-led activities and how nature can really support some of these difficult feelings for you and your children and your wider family. Thank you, Sam.
Sam, I can't hear you. I don't know if anyone else is having the same problem.
Can you hear me now? Oh, great. Okay, sorry about that. I'll just go back. Thank you, Gemma. I'm Sam, another member of the Wild for Life team. Just following on from what Gemma was saying there, the outdoors and nature can provide a brilliant distraction for a child that's struggling with their emotions. For example, if you have a child that's having a meltdown, the outdoors can really support them to navigate their way back to a place of emotional safety. So often as parents, we become really caught up in what we feel is right and wrong and correcting behaviours without looking at the reasons behind them. I'd just like you to take a look at this slide we're putting up now. This is a really helpful quote to remember when your child demonstrates behaviour that may seem completely out of context to you. There we are. Look always to the root and not the fruit. The fruit in this slide demonstrates your child's behaviour, and the root is reflective of the reasons behind that behaviour. Of course, sometimes it's just simply not possible to provide a distraction for behaviour. For example, when you're out in a busy shopping centre, that particular moment wouldn't be realistic to delve deeper into the reasons behind why your child's having a tantrum. We're now going to show you an activity that you could perhaps return to at a calmer time when you can both reflect on what's happened. It will allow you as a parent time to learn exactly what your child was struggling with at that moment, and allows your child a little bit of space to express that to you. I think Charlotte's going to upload a link now into the chat that you can click on and view the video. When you've finished watching that, you can just pop back over to the Zoom meeting. I hope you all enjoy it.